Hey folks, this is Pastor Edwin Lugo here, obviously, and it's Friday, and it's in the afternoon, and I wanted to take just a few moments here to just share a few thoughts with you about kind of what's going on in Oregon and our county and our city with Wilsonville, and specifically how it applies to Pioneer. I know every once in a while over the last couple of weeks we've been sharing updates on Sundays, but I don't want to bog down Sundays with those things. And so I wanted to take some time on this Friday before the weekend hit to kind of share some thoughts with you, let you know kind of where we are and where we're headed. I don't want you to be in the dark as far as that's concerned. Obviously, as many of us know, and I have some notes here that I'm just going to be looking at and going through. As many of us know, over the last 2 months, we really began an unprecedented journey through this whole coronavirus COVID-19 crisis, and we as a church have done the best we could with the current circumstances. We cooperated at every level with the government and carefully followed the recommendations of the CDC and we moved our services to an online format, and we continue to do that. I have personally spoken with other pastors and medical professionals and state leaders, including the city manager that kind of heads up the community center in Wilsonville. So I've tried to stay informed and know what's going on and how it applies directly to us. 2 months ago, I believed it was the right decision for us to submit to the authorities over us, as Romans 13 tells us to do. And we did it for the safety of those within our community, and really for the safety for those within our church family. And at the same time, even from that moment 2 months ago, I felt uncomfortable with the fact that we weren't going to be corporately meeting together again, and that to some extent we were labeled as non-essential within the greater scheme of things. Um, and on top of that, going into that without having any concrete plan of or knowledge of when we would be able to meet back together again, and just kind of felt in limbo throughout this entire time. Um, and so, at the forefront of my mind throughout all of that is the importance of the church to gather, to assemble together. Um, and as was modeled for us within the New Testament and is instructed for us to do in Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 25. And so with those realities in mind, I've continued to wrestle with the idea of when do we meet back in person again. Obviously, we have a very unique situation because our building isn't our own, and so there are some churches that are planning to meet this weekend. And there are some churches that are planning to hold off a little bit longer and have different plans written out, and that's great. And one of the things that I've learned, and I encourage you to do throughout this, and I've said this before many times, if there was a perfect plan, everybody would enact it. And the reality is, every leader that's in a place to make decisions is in a tough place because they're making decisions going into the unknown. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of lack of information. We really don't know what the future holds. But with all of that in mind, I've tried to give leaders that either walk the path I do or do it or go a different way a lot of leeway and grace, because none of us have really prepared for this before. However, I'm not here to talk about what other people are doing. I just want to share some thoughts about our plans, our current plans with Pioneer. As I shared with you guys on Sunday, I believe it was, I sent an email to Brian Stevenson, who's the city manager who manages and looks over the community center. And I just want to read to you a portion of that. I said I wanted to reach out and see if there's have there been any more planning or thought put into when city-owned buildings like the community center will open up and when they may be available again. I know the last I heard was May 31st. We're just trying to plan and prepare for Pioneer Baptist Church for when we can resume, and want to have the best information we can as we plan. I said also we wanted to be prepared if the governor gives the allowances for churches to reconvene, but Wilsonville keeps its buildings closed. I told him that at that time we would probably make alternate plans if that ended up being the case. And I sent to him a rough draft of a reopening plan for Pioneer Baptist Church. All of this was before I even started that. I thanked him for his help. He's been very helpful in communicating to us and to me. And again, as a leader himself within the city of Wilsonville, having to make very difficult decisions, he responded back to me, and this was his response. He said, Edwin, I appreciate you reaching out. I will be part of a meeting on Thursday that will discuss possible reopening plans and what that may look like. He said, you've done a great job of laying out a proposed reopening plan for Pioneer Baptist, so you're ahead of the game on that front. Once I have more information of when, what, and how the reopening of the community center may look like, I will let you know. So I patiently waited Thursday and Friday, and then this morning he responded back to me, and this was his response to me. He said, Edwin, I wanted to circle back with you after my meeting yesterday. While I don't have any concrete answers, I can give you a bit more information. This is the information that he offered. He said, first of all, the closure of city buildings will stay in place until the county reopens. And I expected as much. I didn't expect Wilsonville to operate outside of the bounds of Clackamas County, which is the county, even though Wilsonville has two counties, Washington and Clackamas, it operates within Clackamas County, and I didn't expect them to operate outside of that. As many of you know, Clackamas County was one of the counties that didn't even submit reopening plans. And so many of the counties around here are reopening, or I shouldn't say around here, many of the counties around here are not reopening, but throughout the rest of the state are reopening. In this email, he did say Clackamas County is expected to apply for reopening with the state sometime before the end of the month. Now, that was pertinent information to me because I don't know how many articles or news reports you read. There was one that was quoted, I want to say it was a county councilman or councilwoman from Clackamas County who said maybe June 15th. But according to Brian, it said that the Clackamas County is expected to apply for reopening with the state sometime before the end of the month. We are in May, so I'm hoping that's the case and praying that that's the case. The approval process may be quick. It may not. As we saw this week, there were some that were approved right away. There were a few that were still under, that the governor wanted to look over a little bit more and have some more information, and then she made a decision on that. He goes on and says, once the county moves into phase 1 of reopening, the city will analyze all their facilities and determine which shall open and when. So in other words, they're not even making a decision on when these buildings are going to be open until the county is officially open. So let's say, I'm just looking at a calendar here, let's say they apply and get reopening on May 29th. I'm going to guess it'll probably still be the first week of June until the city of Wilsonville reconvenes and decides what to do. That's just my interpretation of this. He then goes on and says, until the community center is reopened, even if it's just in a limited capacity, which I have always been. Nobody has told me this. So this has just always been my assumption that the community center would probably open up in limited capacities. It wouldn't be a full open. He says, until the community center is reopened, we would not be able to start rentals again, which I understand. I didn't think that he would or that they would, but that's kind of the situation we are in. He did say, I have forwarded your rough draft reopening plan to our emergency operations team for their review and feedback. I will be in touch as I know more. And so that was the communication with Brian there at the community center. As I communicated to him that if the governor gave the go-ahead for churches to reconvene or open up, and really with the court case that was going on, this weekend and some other things. I think there were many churches that were going to move forward. And again, if we had a building, we may have been in that push and in that fight a little bit more. But one of the things that I do believe has kind of flown under the radar is that in the governor's reopening plan, many people are focusing on phase one, phase two, and phase three. However, there is a baseline opening. And basically, the baseline reopening is statewide, all 36 counties, regardless of whether they've put in a reopening plan or not. Starting today, May 15th, there are new guidelines that take effect for all counties that are not entering phase one of reopening. So that would include Clackamas County. I have it right here in front of me. One of the things that is mentioned in the baseline reopening, so this is lower than phase one, phase two, phase three. All these other many of these other counties are in phase one. Clackamas is in this baseline. This is what it says, and I have it highlighted here. Local, cultural, civic, and faith gatherings are allowed for up to 25 people, provided physical distancing can be in place. So basically, that was what many people were expecting in phase one, is now in the baseline allowance of the governor as well. And I'll read it again. Local, cultural, civic, and faith gatherings are allowed for up to 25 people, provided physical distancing can be in place. Obviously, again, if it was our building and that was the case, we would enact Pioneer Baptist Church's phase one of reopening, which I'm going to share with you here in just a moment. However, that is not the case. We don't have our own building. We are still waiting for the city of Wilsonville. However, I do want to say that much of my energy for now over the next couple of weeks until Clackamas County moves and the city of Wilsonville moves will be looking for alternate places to meet in which we can still uh, uh, fulfill our obligations that I'm going to share out. I'm going to list out for you here to reopen as a church, to meet together corporately, but also to do it as safely as possible. And so I just wanted to let you know, and what I'm going to do this coming week, and what I'm going to ask you to do. Here's my one big ask from you, and I'll repeat it at the end of this video. Sometime next week, between May 17th and May 23rd, I want you to take some time and pray and fast. I think this is a time for us to do that. And for some of you, you may be able to take a day or two. Some of you may just skip lunch at work and pray instead. And I'm asking our church people to make this commitment right now for God's wisdom and direction for us to take some time during this to pray and to fast. And I may share some more thoughts about that at another time, but I just want to ask you to do that. And would you do that? Would you help us with that? And ask for God's wisdom and direction for us. And spend that time praying and asking God to give wisdom and direction, but also to provide a place for us to meet, whether that's a permanent use facility or whether that's another rental, or I don't know what the case may be. But God does, and so let's ask Him and let's seek His face for that. And then I may re-up on that the next week and the next week, but I want to ask you to do that. With all of that being said, I also want to share with you kind of the basics behind what our reopening plan, Pioneer Baptist Church's reopening plan, looks like. And some of this is subject to change. I gave this to both Emily and Kelsey to look over. Again, they're kind of our resident medical professionals that know way more about it than really any of us do, no matter how much news you read or look or those kinds of things. They're really there on a day-to-day basis seeing what's going on. And I have some approximate dates written down here, but I'm not going to tell you those approximate dates because it's impossible for us to know. So I don't want to, I don't even want to speculate. But I do want you to know right now the plan is for each phase to be a 3-week period. So 21 days in between each phase. And so I'm going to share them with you. And if you have questions or need clarification or maybe have pertinent suggestion, um, email me is honestly probably the easiest way, because I can collect that information and keep it written down somewhere. And again, this is not 100% set in stone, but this is where we are leaning, and again, we're waiting on feedback from the city of Wilsonville. And again, this is also in Emily and Kelsey's possession as well as mine, and we've compared it with CDC things and even other churches and those kinds of things. But in phase one, when Pioneer Baptist Church begins phase one, we will be asking the vulnerable population to stay home. Now, obviously, we can't force you to stay home, but we are going to strongly suggest that you still stay home over the period of phase one. You say, who is the vulnerable population? First of all, the vulnerable population is elderly individuals. Um, some say 60, some say 65, but if you're in that age range or over, you are, even if, and this is important for you to understand, even if you're in pristine health, even if you've never had any other physical issue, the fact that you are an older individual, 60 or above, you are still part of the vulnerable population. You just are. And so we want to encourage you, again, even if you have great health, um, you are just more susceptible to it. Again, everybody that I've spoken to, Emily, Kelsey, I mean, everybody agrees with that. Um, Also, individuals who have serious underlying health conditions. Those include high blood pressure, uh, pregnancy, chronic lung disease, respiratory illnesses such as asthma, emphysema, COPD, autoimmune diseases, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, celiac, MS, Crohn's disease. This includes people that are taking immune suppressive drugs, drugs that suppress your immune system, people that have diabetes or kidney disease or on dialysis, people with liver disease, heart disease, and even those that are that struggle with morbid obesity, those whose immune system is compromised, uh, such as by chemotherapy for cancer and other conditions requiring such therapy. Again, I didn't make these up on my own. We have learned, there's a model, there's a picture of what somebody who is a vulnerable part of the vulnerable population, and these are many of the things that are included in there. When we start phase one, when we can start in-person services, the max group size will be 25. And the plan for us right now would be to hold services at 9:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. We would just hold two main worship services, one at 9:30 a.m. and the next one at 11 a.m. And what we would have you do, since the max size would be 25, and if need be, we would do a third service, maybe at 12:30, so 9:30, 11, and 12:30. What we would do is we would have an online registration or registration by phone, and you would be able to register your family group, and that would also help us to be able to set up chairs properly in those family groups, and then to cut off how many people would be coming to that service once we have reached the limit. And so if we get to that point, we'll explain all of that. We'll make sure you get the information for how to register properly as we get there. There will be no greeters. However, we will have hand sanitation stations that we're going to ask you to use upon entry and upon exit. There will be no hugging, no handshaking, no touching, even arms around other people to pray with them. I would like to have communion when we come back together, but we will not do it unless we can find a sanitary way to do it. There will be no passing of the communion elements. We will encourage masks. We'll encourage you to wear masks, and if you want to wear one but don't have one, we will have some on site for you to use and to have. Ushers, or we will have ushers that will be there to seat people by their families, to point them to the seated section that is set aside for them. During phase one, giving will remain by mail or by online, like many of you have been doing, and we're so thankful for that. But during phase one, there will not be an offering that will be passed. There will be no bulletins or paper products, no welcome desk, no refreshment table, no any of those things. During phase one, attenders will be screened, their temperatures will be taken, and they'll be asked if anyone has been sick or experiencing any symptoms. And if their temperature is, I believe the temp is 99.5. It may be higher than that. I'll have to get clarification on that. But if their temperature is high, or if they've experienced any of those symptoms or exhibiting any of them, we will not allow them to enter on that day. Sanitation and wellness practices will be recommended, again, including hand sanitation on the way in and out, cleaning of surfaces, including chairs in between services and things like that. We will, to the best of our ability, still be providing online services for those who may be in the vulnerable population or who aren't comfortable yet being a part. And so we will still offer online services that way. There will be no 9:30 discipleship class. There will be no 9:30 Elevate Youth class, and there will be no nursery, and there will be no Pioneer Kids. And part of the reason for that is it's just more difficult to maintain proper social distancing, and especially with kids in nursery, they're touching things and slobbering on things and swapping things, and then also to ask people to stay in the nursery that maybe aren't prepared to do that or ready to do that. Again, we don't know what facility we might be using, so that may be difficult as well. Um, and then for the time being, throughout phase one, both small groups and evening services, which we're going to be starting up this week, will remain online. Again, there are other aspects that haven't been discussed or decided yet, as far as like congregational singing, music, and a few other things, little details that we'll try to clean up. But that's the plan for phase one right now. Phase two, which will be 3 weeks after phase one, will look like this. We will recommend that the vulnerable population stay home. Again, we can't keep you home. Phase one, it's a strong recommendation. We really, really encourage you and recommend you stay home. The second one is a little bit less. We recommend it, but that's completely up to you. Lord willing, by that point, Clackamas County itself will have moved into. So some of this is going to be dependent upon us moving with how the county we're in moves as well. Hopefully by that point, max group sizes will be 100, which would allow us to have one service at 10:30 a.m. There would still be no greeters. There would still be hand sanitation stations there for entry and exit. There will still again ask for no hugging, no handshaking, no touching, no passing of the communion elements. We will still encourage the use of masks. Ushers will still seat people by their families in keeping with proper social distancing. Giving will still continue by mail and by online. We still will not use bulletins or paper products or welcome desks, the welcome desk materials or welcome desk at all, or refreshment table. There is a possibility in phase two that nursery and Pioneer Kids will resume with screening. So we would screen those kids if it's feasible and if it's proven that it can work and that we can have the space and the volunteers, and we would probably make multiple small nurseries and those kinds of things. There's a possibility that it could be put back in phase two. Online services will still be available for those who are not comfortable yet coming to them in person. And then there will again be no Elevate Youth or Discipleship class at 9:30 yet. Small group and evening services will remain online. Phase three, which would be 3 weeks after phase two, we encourage the vulnerable population to use their own wisdom and discretion. In-person services will then include 9:30 discipleship class and Elevate Youth. There will be a 10:30 a.m. worship service and Pioneer Kids, with again the max group size being 100. However, there will still not be any greeters, although the hand sanitation stations would still be there, and we would ask for you to use them upon entry and exit. There again be no hugging, no handshaking, no touching, no passing of the communion elements. We would encourage masks again and have them available for you. Ushers will still seat people by their families and with keeping with social distance, and giving will remain by mail or by online, and there will be no bulletin or paper products, welcome desk, or refreshment table. Um, that is phase three. And then we'll move from there. Again, this is just a plan we have in place for the future and what we're hoping to do. There were a few questions or thoughts that even popped into my mind. I'm going to look over them really quickly. One of the reasons we're not doing bulletins and paper products and refreshment tables and welcome desks is because those are all just places that multiple hands can go and touch, and people tend to gather around those things, and we're really trying to keep that from happening. And the other thing I want to address is, while I did say during all of these things, including phase three, that online services would be available and that our small group and evening services will remain online, part of the reason we're continuing to keep small group and evening services online is because many of those things, especially small groups, those are, and I mentioned this a little bit in our small group on Wednesday that was on Zoom. Small groups are people going into other people's homes. So first of all, we're in order for us to say we're having small groups, we're imposing ourselves on other people's homes, the Tucker's homes, our home, or possibly the McLeod's home, and I don't want them to feel pressured or forced into that. Also, it's a smaller setting, it's a closer setting in somebody's home than the church building would be, and you're taking 5, 6, 7 family units and squeezing them into a smaller space, and that includes children that are now crossing with adults, and it's just it's one of the more likely places or opportunities for things to not go well. And so that's one of the reasons that we're still keeping those things online for the time being. Another thing that I want to say, while we are offering things online, especially Sunday services online, please do not use that as an excuse to come. If you're not comfortable coming yet, or if you're part of the vulnerable population, then that's fine. We understand that. I understand that. But what we are saying is that we want you to we want you to come if you're able to, and if you're willing and ready to. Not one of those things where it's just, well, I don't want to go. It's online. I'll watch it here. I want to read this. I want to read this to you, and I don't mean it as a shot at anybody, but I do think it's important for us to realize. Um, Somebody said this: Christians, before you criticize the government putting the church into non-essential business, ask yourself first, did you do the same as a Christian? Did you treat the church as non-essential in your life? Did you skip services? Did you come 10 minutes late or perhaps 30 minutes late? Did you put church after your dream job, your big client meeting, your family road trip? Did you treat the worship service nothing more than a music concert or entertainment? Did you listen to sermons no different than self-help psychology? Don't be silly. We as Christians have long treated church as non-essential, and that's why the world sees through our hypocrisy. No need to win a debate. Win your souls. And I'm not saying we have anybody that necessarily fits into those. However, if you're convicted by that, then let the Holy Spirit convict you. But what I am saying is, let's not sit here as believers and say, hey, churches ought to be essential, and we want to get back together to worship, and then when the opportunity comes, go back to acting as if church isn't essential. And I believe it is. I have a biblical conviction that it is. And so I want us to safely and properly do this and be prepared for this, but to come back together and to worship together with you. And so I wanted to share some of these thoughts with you and have you know a little bit about that. I hope it's been somewhat of a help to you. And again, I encourage you, especially over the last week. I don't have all the answers. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm either going to be too late or too early. Nobody's going to be on time except for God. I'm gonna do things you agree with. I'm gonna do things you don't agree with, and that's why I need you to pray. That's why I need you to fast and pray and to seek the Lord for wisdom for our decisions. I appreciate your kindness, your grace. Many of you have just stuck with it with us and through this thing, and I really appreciate that. And so, God bless you guys. Have a good rest of the weekend.